Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce Sun Summit Minerals to you today, a gold and copper explorer with a large land package in BC. For the webinar, we have with us Sharyn Alexander, president of the company. Sharyn will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities underway at the Buck Main Zone and other regional targets on the property. After the presentation, we'll take your questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print for Sun Summit. There may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Sun Summit corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Sun Summit specific disclosures. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Sharyn. Please take it away.
Thanks, Alina. Great introduction. So for those who are new to the story, we're Sun Summit Minerals. We are focused in central BC, precious metals, and also we've recently acquired a project from Teck Resources. As Alina mentioned, forward-looking statements, so please do your own due diligence. Investment in the junior mining sector can be high risk, so just having that note out there. So in terms of Sun Summit, we are an exploration company focused in BC, central British Columbia. So our Buck project is now 52,000 hectares. We have the Buck Main system, which is where we've done most of our drilling. It's a bulk tonnage style mineralization, gold, silver, zinc. So we're getting hundreds of meters of near surface mineralization. As well, we have some high grade vein hosted gold that we found as well. This system is very similar to the Blackwater Gold Project, which recently has been permitted, and that's owned by Artemis Gold. In addition, we've recently increased our land package. We staked additional ground, and then as well, we acquired a project off of Teck, which has seen some drilling. However, it has a lot of upside for the precious metals components and ties in well to our property-wide exploration that we've really been focusing on in the past few years. The area itself, it's in a really great mineral endowed region near formerly producing mines. The Buck project itself is 100% controlled by us, but it is an optioned tenure. We are in the 4th year of a 5-year earn-in agreement. And then the CR property is 100% owned by Sun Summit. We are well funded, so we're fully funded for exploration. We recently closed an oversubscribed financing for $2.9 million. So we're able to access capital and we have a good baseline. In terms of catalysts, we have the results from some scout drilling that we did at 2 targets outside the Buck Main Zone, Irk and Eagle Eye. Those are going to be coming out very shortly. And in addition, we are commencing a multi-stage exploration program on the Buck project. This includes drilling at Buck Main. So this is expansion drilling, step-out drilling that we're doing to increase the mineralized footprint. And then as well, some exploration on new areas on the new ground that we picked up and looking at some of these precious metals targets. So we're going to have significant news flow throughout the summer and into the fall, and we'll be working towards an additional exploration program towards later in the year. So I mentioned this was in a great area. So it's central BC. We don't have some of the seasonality and access issues that they do in more remote locations of British Columbia, for example, like the Golden Triangle. This area is very road and trail accessible. It's just south of the town of Houston. So our closest town is Smithers. So it's about an hour flight from Vancouver, and then it's about an hour drive south to the town of Houston. And we can actually drive right to the drill rig. So where we're drilling at Buck Main, we can access that via Forest Service roads and trails. Much of the area has been logged previously. Forestry has been in the area. And so this leads to very easy access. This leads to year-round access. So we can actually access the drill rig or drill 12 months out of the year. This also leads to significant cost savings in terms of exploration costs. We're town-based, we don't have a camp, we don't have to rely on helicopter support for the drilling. So this is really fantastic, especially at a time now where inflation costs and supplies and personnel is really getting quite expensive to explore, but we're really in a great time, a great area where we can manage those costs. The area itself, it's very well endowed. So we have formerly producing mines. Equity Silver Mine is just to the east, and that at one point was one of the largest or the largest silver producer in BC. Huckleberry Copper Mine is just to the south. And then as well, the Blackwater Mine, or recently it just got permitted, the Blackwater Gold Project, owned by Artemis Gold. And we're using that as the analog for Buckmean, which I'll go into a bit later. So it's really an emerging belt. There's a lot of active exploration and development projects in the area. Equity Metals is to the south, Universal Copper, Surge Copper is to the south as well. So this whole belt is really great in terms of gold, silver, copper, a lot of precious metals and base metal potential here. So in terms of the Buckmean system itself, and this is where we've spent most of our time drilling, this is an area that we saw historic drilling that had some really interesting intercepts. It had been explored back in the 80s, for example, where the price of gold was just not at where it is today, for example. And this being more of a bulk tonnage type system, you need the size and scale in order for it to be economic. And that's what we're finding here. So we've drilled so far 84 drill holes for over 30,000 meters. Every time we step out, every time we drill, we find more mineralization. So it's really unconstrained laterally on all sides and at depth. And that's the main reason why we have not put a resource on it yet. Management is discussing the potential for a resource, and we'll continue to discuss when we think that this is the right time, but we keep hitting more mineralization. And so we're very happy to keep drilling. Recently, we've announced that we'll be commencing a significant drill program. So we will be drilling about 3,500 meters over 15 drill holes. This is mostly to the north, the northeast, and northwest, where we see some really great potential for expansion. For those of you that follow the story, the north area and the west areas where we've seen some of this mosaic breccia, so that's the very zinc-rich rock. And then as well, we were able to identify additional bulk tonnage style mineralization to the west from our drill program last fall. In terms of the mineralization here, I mentioned it's bulk tonnage. So this means it's a lot of the mineralization is disseminated throughout the rocks. So if you imagine a porous rock, like a pyroclastic, and fluids, mineralizing fluids coming up and just being disseminated throughout the whole rock. And so that's most of the mineralization that we're seeing here. And in effect, we're left with a large amount of mineralization at low to moderate grades. So 0.5 gram to 1 gram per ton gold, but over several hundred meters right from surface. So that's really what the potential is here. And as well, very similar to Blackwater, I'll mention that in a bit, but they have the same kind of grades that they're seeing there. In addition, we made a high-grade discovery in 2020. We hit 1.5 meters of close to 50 gram per ton gold. And then in 2021, we followed that up with 0.5 meter of 250 gram per ton gold. So this is a different style of mineralization. It's more vein or veinlet hosted. And we still believe that there's high grade in the system. We do intersect high grade within these broader zones of more disseminated mineralization. And so what this drill program is doing is we took a lot of the data from previous drill programs and also from surface mapping, and we put that into a 3D model. And we were really able to fine tune and focus on these potential conduits for the higher grade mineralization. With a better understanding on the controls on mineralization, that will lead to better drill targeting. And so what we're targeting with this drill program coming up is going to be really specific targets of high grade and bulk tonnage gold in areas that haven't been previously drill tested. So we're pretty excited to get this program started, and the results will be out, later in this year, and will help us to plan additional drilling at Buckmain. So here's a long section showing a slice through the Buckmain system. On the east is where you see a lot of that bulk tonnage mineralization. So hundreds of meters of gold, silver, and zinc, 0.5 gram to 1 gram per ton gold. And we've actually worked these three metals into a gold equivalent calculation. So we've done some initial metallurgical test work just to see if these metals were recoverable. And we find that initial results is that they are. And so we have combined them into a gold equivalent calculation. And you can see that we have, over 1 gram per ton gold equivalent in a lot of cases, over several hundred meters. So this is the size and scale potential that you would need in order to make this bulk tonnage deposit economic. And then as well, we have more of the vein hosted higher grade gold, which silver and zinc as well, that it's more in the center in a more competent rock, the volcaniclastics, for example. And so it's a different style of mineralization. So it's very complex here. We think there's been multiple fluid phases, multiple stages of mineralization. So it's a very complex system. But it's a very good problem to have, is that we have a lot of mineralization, and every time we drill, we learn more and we're able to model that. And to go over the progression of our drill programs, so we optioned the property in 2019, and in early 2020, we began drilling. And you can see how the mineralized envelope over the years has really expanded. The top view there is plan view, so that's looking down. And then the bottom row is a long section looking north. So what you can see here is that not only have we been successful at finding mineralization, but the mineralization, it's cohesive, it's consistent, it's from surface. And so this is pretty exciting. We're now over 1 kilometer in strike length and about 600 meters in depth and growing. So when we drill, currently when we're starting to drill, we'll be adding those drill holes to this model, and we'll be able to grow this mineralized footprint additionally. So we're excited for those results. So I mentioned the comparison to Blackwater. So this is owned by Artemis Gold. Their proven and probable reserves are 8 million ounces at 0.75 gram per ton gold. So not super high grades, but what they have here is the size and scale. And you can see on the map on the left, they have their main deposit is about 1 kilometer in strike length. And when we look at Buckmain, we're also 1 kilometer or just over, and it's still open in all directions. It's the same kind of system, so this is the same type of emplacement for the metals, same metal association, which was really interesting because we actually find a correlation between zinc and the gold. Now, we've talked about this before, where we've used this as a pathfinder element. Zinc is a lot more mobile in the surface environment, and also you can read it in the field. For example, with an XRF device, we take a sample or we drill a hole, and we can actually see in the field what the readings are for certain metals, zinc included. And so with this strong correlation, we've really been able to focus our exploration strategy and targeting and make some quick decisions in the field. This is something that was pointed out by our technical advisor, Chris Leslie, who was actually part of the discovery team of the Blackwater project when it was Richfield Ventures. And so he's really been guiding our exploration strategy. And we're finding it's working out quite well when we're seeing geochemical anomalies and then having that associated with gold, for example. And then as well, geophysics, a very similar geophysical signature. Now, why the geochemistry and geophysics is very important is because, as I mentioned, this area is covered by a lot of overburden. There's a lot of glacial till, and so traditional prospecting and mapping isn't always possible in a lot of these areas. So we have to use alternative exploration techniques like surface sampling, airborne and ground geophysics, and then, compile a lot of these data types and finding if there's coincident anomalies. This is actually how we identified ERK and Eagle Eye initially, and then led us to the drill program that we conducted earlier in the year. And it's helping to build additional targets on the property that will be moving towards the drill ready stage. So if you've been following us for a while, you'll know that we've also increased our focus on some of the property-wide targets. We know we have a mineralized system at Buckmain, and we are going to continue to drill and expand that. But being in such a great mineralized region, we wanted to see what else we had on the property. The discovery potential here is pretty high. There's a lot of exploration upside. And then as well, this coincides to the time where we were granted last year a property-wide exploration permit. So previously we could only drill the Buckmain zone, but now we can drill everywhere on the property, at least where the property that we had when we had the application. So you can see on the map here, there are some areas not covered in the geophysics, which is a survey we ran last year in preparation for some of the field work we were planning. So it's kind of as a first pass overview. The new ground we have is to the south and the southwest. And then, of course, the CR property that we picked up from Teck is to the west as well. Fortunately, we have quite a lot of information from Teck, including geophysics, sampling, LiDAR and satellite imagery. And so that's going to be compiled, and the team is currently in the field preparing to start work on those areas. So I'll just focus on a few areas that we are focusing on for our current exploration program. I'll mention ERK and Eagle Eye. You can see on the map there, those results are going to be coming out very shortly. And those were the first time, that was the first time we drilled outside of the Buckmain zone. So very exciting for us to start going through these pipeline of targets that we have identified and prospecting with the drill bit. So one area that we brought up earlier in the year as a prospective target was to the west of the property, Morris Mountain. So this area hasn't seen a lot of exploration. And last summer, we ended up taking some silt samples, so stream samples. And what we found is some gold and silver results that were way above background values. So usually in this area, there's kind of a standard background of gold, silver, zinc, copper, lead, and all that. And these values are very high. And so that alerted us to the fact that there could be something significant here. And we knew we wanted to return this year to the Morris Mountain area when, as soon as the snow cleared, to do some additional sampling, mapping, and prospecting. Around the same time, we were looking to the west, and you can see the 10-year line in the map here. Just to the west of that was Teck's property, the CR. And so as soon as we identified the Morris Mountain target, we knew that, first of all, we thought that the mineralization did appear on our ground as opposed to Teck's ground, but there was the chance that there was additional mineralization on the Teck ground. And then, so that really caught our attention, and that's when we really focused on acquisition of the Teck property. And you can see, I'll show you on the next slide as well, that there's quite a lot of potential here. So here's the Teck ground. You can see in the inset map that it covers a great area in prospective rock types. Now, Teck has done quite a lot of drilling on this property in terms of copper and molybdenum at what they're calling the South Zone. So this is a porphyry type system. But what really excited us here is the north area, very underexplored. You can see on the map that we have Morris Mountain, anomalous silver and gold samples that we saw that we're going to be following up on. But then as well, there's anomalous samples, rock samples, gold and silver as well on the Teck property. And so after our team has finished exploring at the Buckmain zone in preparation for drilling, we're going to be moving over west. And so in the area that you see in the inset map, the yellow box, we're going to be focusing on that area for exploration for June and July. So our geologists will get on the ground, they'll look at, they'll do some mapping, prospecting, sampling, look at some of the rock samples and some of the core, for example, that Teck has, and seeing if, what the prospectivity here in this area. Also, I'll mention that the CR property comes with an existing exploration permit. So just like our property, we can drill at these targets. And so it is our goal to have some drill ready targets this year if we can. And that will be pretty exciting for us to be able to see what other potential is here on the project for precious metals specifically. In terms of ESG, we do take this very seriously. The changing environment, especially in British Columbia, is I think it's great. We have First Nations that we engage with. There's several nations and bands in our area. We meet with them and we share information. We have an exploration agreement with one of them. And then as well, we try to hire local as much as we can, especially First Nations owned businesses. So there's a lot of business procurement opportunities that we look into. In addition, there's environmental regulations, wildlife plans, and we follow the restrictions of the permit and drill when it's safe to do so. But we think that this is definitely not a bad thing. We're very happy to we take ESG pretty seriously, and we're very happy to work with the different groups in the area. So in terms of share structure, we are at 102 million shares outstanding, so 144 million fully diluted. Our market cap is currently 7 or 8 million, and we have about 3.5 million in the bank. So our working capital is pretty healthy. Our current exploration program, which includes drilling at Buck Main as well as surface and field exploration elsewhere on the property, our budget for that is $1.5 million. That will take us to about August, and then we'll be starting another field program after that, depending on the results. So we've recently closed oversubscribed financing, which I mentioned. So we raised $2.9 million for the treasury. Our volume is pretty good, 130,000 daily. In terms of ownership, 11% insider ownership. Most of that is in this estate of Tukey Angus, who was our previous chairman. Most of the ownership is high net worth and retail individuals. So we're really happy to have a loyal shareholder base who really believe in the story. In terms of significant investors in this group, one would be our property vendor. So I mentioned it's an option property. Our property vendor is at about 10% ownership now. And so he really believes in the project, and most of the option agreement was very share heavy as opposed to cash. So he really wanted to support the company, and that's really great to see. And then about 26% institutions and funds. We also have some warrants that are going to be expiring in July. Those will be out of the money, so those will drop off the books as well. So in terms of management, I'm president. Bob Willis, who founded the company with Tukey Angus, our previous chairman, he's a senior advisor, and he's very involved with the daily management of Sun Summit. And then as well, we have a new executive chairman. So Brian Locke is also very experienced in the mining industry and has run several companies of his own. Ken McDonald is our VP Exploration. Chris Leslie, as I mentioned, technical advisor, and he was previously with Richfield Ventures, who made the discovery of the Blackwater project. So we have a really great technical team and team of directors. So in terms of upcoming catalysts, we are starting to drill at Buck Main very soon. 3,500 meters planned for over 15 drill holes, and we'll see how that goes if we need to add to that. We're also starting the multi-stage field exploration program. So starting at the Morris Mountain zone or area and going to the CR property, focusing on precious metals potential here. And then additional exploration would be planned for later in the year, dependent on the results that we're seeing from the initial exploration we do. So we do have significant discovery potential. It's in a great area, excellent infrastructure. We are fully funded for exploration, and we have year-round access. And so yeah, it's a pretty good project. And that's about it.
Well, thanks a lot, Sharyn. That was a great presentation. So we can get started on the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just as a reminder for our participants, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So Sharyn, a few questions here already. Let's start off with the CR property. So, you had a pretty sizable land package already with plenty of exploration targets.
Yeah.
So what was the rationale behind the CR property acquisition?
Yeah, we always knew that Teck had a project to the west, but it wasn't until we started field exploration last summer where we took those very anomalous silt samples at the Morris Mountain area that we realized that this area could actually be very prospective. And so that's when we seriously started thinking about Teck, and would it be nice to expand the ground just to ensure that we have a buffer around whatever we do discover on our property, but then as well to have that extra ground to explore and see the potential upside there. And so it really was not necessarily to increase the land package, just to have more land. We really did think it was a prospective area specifically for the precious metal component and specifically tied to what we were finding in the Morris Mountain area. I can continue a bit with that. So in terms of CR, we're going to be doing a lot of prospecting there this year, sampling. It is pretty interesting, the gold that we're seeing. So it could be the same style of mineralization that we're seeing at Buck, Maine. Our initial exploration is seeing very similar styles of rock. And so, yeah, we'll just continue with the exploration there.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties.
I can hear you, Alina.
Okay, all right. So Sharyn, moving on to the next question over here. How do you prioritize some of the other targets that you have on the property against what you have at CR?
Exactly. In terms of priorities for this upcoming program, which is commencing very shortly, we are focusing on the Morris Mountain and CR area. We think that the anomalous samples that we took last year is worth following up on. And in addition, we can look at additional work in terms of geophysics, or if we need to do additional sampling and mapping. A lot of the other targets, for example, with Irk and Eagle Eye, we always knew that Irk was a great target. It has a huge geochemical anomaly in terms of zinc and soils. We really wanted to fine tune that and figure out where to drill the holes. So for example, we did a ground IP survey and we did additional sampling and mapping, and we were able to advance that to the drill ready stage, and the same with Eagle Eye. So it's just in terms of areas that we're seeing pretty prospective, coincident anomalies using the geophysics, geochemistry, and then as well as just gut feel from our geologists, like areas that potentially could have discoveries in terms of great rock types, the age of the rock, if there's any major structures going through, if it's near another occurrence. For example, having a project like CR that Teck has done some initial exploration has helped. They've already found gold in rocks, gold and silver in rock samples. And so, instead of us spending the money to do the exploration, we have a project which comes with millions of dollars worth of exploration already done on it. And so we're able to benefit from that.
Okay, all right. Just moving over to Buck, Maine. So the drilling that you're planning on completing there, is that, are you going to look to extend the strike a little further, or continue drilling where, the mineralization currently is?
I guess the answer would probably be both, but it is our plan to step out and really extend the mineralization as well as target specific areas. So we the drilling is planned to the north and to the west and to the east in areas where we haven't stepped out in the past. So I don't think this program is going to extend the strike length per se, but it'll extend the width of the resource, of the area. And so there's areas that really we'd like to target structural zones that maybe have acted as a conduit to mineralization. So we're really targeting some of this higher grade that we know is there in the system. And with the new information we acquired from the 3D model, we're able to target some of these areas that really haven't been drill tested before. So it's a combination of learning more about the system, targeting specific grades and intercepts, as well as expanding the footprint. All of this would be in preparation of a potential resource.
Okay, when would you think about a resource estimate on the project?
Yeah, management has been discussing this and will continue to discuss. It would really be dependent on the results that we see from this program that we're beginning. And so we'll have a better answer for you once we get those results.
Okay. Are there any crown grounds associated with CR?
So you mean in terms of not as opposed to private versus crown land? I mean, the whole area is, it's our mineral tenure, and then there is crown land in the area. But as part of our permit, we are allowed to do exploration. There's certain restrictions in terms of, environmental and things like that. But the crown land does not impede our exploration. Okay.
All right. Another question that just came through here, Sharyn. Sun Summit is often compared to Blackwater. Artemis just announced it adds $40 million to Blackwater gold mine budget. How does that affect your look on the economics of low-grade deposit in an inflationary environment?
Exactly. I mentioned before that the Buck main system in the Bob Creek area, that has been explored for several years. In the 80s, they did quite a lot of drilling. The price of gold just wasn't what it is at now. And so a bulk tonnage type low grade system would not have been economic. So what the Blackwater gold permit, the gold mine permit shows us is that not only can mines be permitted in BC, but also a bulk tonnage deposit can be economic. And Blackwater, I think, is showing that in spades. So they've not only got their mine permits, but they're being very green about it. They're going to be low carbon, working with the First Nations. I mean, really, Artemis is doing a great job for the region in central BC, really bringing mining to the forefront. This area has seen some economic hardships. For example, the pipeline work is wrapping up. A lot of the mills are shutting down. And so there's this huge workforce that is skilled and ready to work. And having something like the Blackwater mine being constructed and go into production, I think would be really great for the area. I think it brings a focus to this area, very underexplored. And I think we can all benefit from their success.
All right. So Sharyn, you briefly, you touched on permitting. Can you maybe talk about what the permitting process is like in BC?
Yeah. So there have been criticisms, for example, that BC takes a long time. As long as you're aware of the timeframes for what it takes and you talk regularly with the ministry, you definitely can get your permits. We knew that it might take a while, and so we put in our applications well in advance. And we keep regular contact with the mines inspectors. And so we've had no problems getting our exploration permits. So this is for the drilling, for example. Even without a permit, though, you can do regular exploration in terms of prospecting, mapping. So not having a permit, for example, on some of the newly staked ground that we got acquired earlier in the year, that's not going to stop us from sampling and mapping in those areas. The exploration permits are really just for drilling. And then as soon as we see that there could be potential here, we will put in another application for a permit on that area. So it's a very transparent process here in BC, and it's definitely, you can get a permit.
Okay. Moving on to a question about the ERC target. So I'm just reading this off. The question says, targets like ERC are always tricky because they are so large and zinc is mobile. I guess that's why past workers didn't pull the trigger, but Sun Summit seems to have developed more specific targets that seem to hang together well. Can you comment on your work so far, if the assumptions work out?
Yeah, so they're definitely correct in that it was a very large geochemical anomaly, almost 4 or 5 kilometers by 3 kilometers. So it's like a needle in a haystack. Where do you put those drill targets? So what we did is the initial first pass VTEM survey, airborne geophysical survey over the entire property. From then we followed that up with ground IP, so induced polarization geophysics, and that'll show, for example, where sulfides are in the subsurface. And then with a combination of the different geophysics, we came up with potential structures. And in terms of geology, structures are known to act as conduits or controls on mineralization. And we did a lot of sampling in the surface. So we were seeing areas when we did get rock samples of anomalous silver, copper, lead, and zinc. So we pulled the trigger and we chose 7 drill hole locations that we thought would be the best candidates for mineralization. And also keeping in mind at this stage of the exploration game where you don't have previous drilling, you're essentially prospecting with the drill bit. So you're drilling blind, there's scout holes. Any information you gain from that is going to be beneficial in terms of learning the controls of mineralization in that area and then planning additional drill holes. So yeah, it's a high risk activity, definitely drilling some of these blind targets that have never been drill tested, but that's why people invest. There's also a chance for discoveries. And so that's how a lot of these projects have been found in the past, is through this blind drilling. And you do as much as you can with the data you have, and pull the trigger and drill some holes.
Okay. So moving back to Buck, Maine, has drilling started there already?
It is starting there. It should be starting today. So I will get feedback from the crew, but it was planned that we would start drilling this week. And so, yes, it will be commencing very shortly, if not already.
And then how long do you expect the program to last?
It'll take us to about mid-July, and then we have our crews up there who will be cutting the cores and sending the samples off to the lab. So, we would wait for those results before planning any additional drilling at Buck, Maine after that. What
are the turnaround times on assays looking like?
Yeah, it's definitely better than it had been in the past. During COVID, there were quite significant assay delays, which was very frustrating, not just for management, but also for investors. We're seeing those times substantially lowered. I think labs are adding to the personnel, building new prep labs, for example. It still would take a while, like maybe 4 to 6 weeks. But then, of course, once we get the assays back, we then have to do our QA/QC, like do the quality control, and then, put together intercepts and look at the rocks and what is really going on in the system. So, it definitely lab turnaround times are less than they were during COVID.
Okay. Well, last question here, Sharyn. Could you provide a summary of your upcoming catalysts in, let's say, the next 6 to 12 months?
Sure. So this first stage exploration program will be doing drilling at Buck, Maine, and as well we'll be doing surface exploration specifically at the Mount Morris and CR properties, as well as some of the recently staked ground. So we're hoping this will lead to some additional targets and hopefully drill-ready targets for the fall. So we'll be starting another drill program, or at least planning another drill program and exploration program for Q3 of 2023. And then as well, we have some other initiatives that we're working on as well to help with shareholder value.
All right, great. A lot to look forward to. So that's it for the Q&A portion of the webinar. Sharyn, thank you so much for taking time to host this webinar with us today. Just as a reminder for our audience, our next webinar will feature UR Energy, and that's tomorrow, June 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.